Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please come inside and take a seat. We're starting just a little late today. Want to make sure that everybody that wants to be here can be inside. So today we're broadcasting this also on Facebook Live and recording also for cable. If you could take your seats, please. We're also going to have a few announcements right now. We have interpretation services for those of you that may need to hear this presentation in a different language. And so our wonderful interpreters here are going to make that announcement right now.
Buenos días. Para esos que necesiten interpretación, escuchar la presentación en español, atrás hay auriculares para que puedan escuchar la presentación en español. Gracias.
Xin chào buổi sáng tất cả mọi người. Hôm nay chúng tôi có thông dịch viên nói tiếng Việt. Nếu quý vị nào cần thông dịch viên thì sẽ có máy nghe ở đằng sau. Quý vị có thể tới để lấy. Xin cảm ơn.
今天会有翻译，用广东话和普通話。
今日係有廣東話嘅翻譯，係 Channel 8號嚇，咁隨時可以用廣東話發問。
So if you need to hear in a different language, please go over right now to get your headsets. We're going to give you some time to be able to do that. There's plenty of seats if you would like to take your seats. Get comfortable. And we're going to start now. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Quintero, and I have the great honor of being the mayor of the city of El Monte. And I will be the MC for today. I do want to acknowledge some special guests that we have with us today. I'd like to begin by introducing our Mayor Pro Tem, Jerry Velasco. He's here today. Let's give him a big round of applause. And also Councilmember Maria Morales. And I did get a call this morning from Councilmember Victoria Martinez, who said she regrets not being able to be here today, but wanted to wish us well. So I want to acknowledge her as well. Also, we have our city clerk that's here, Kathy Aridia. She's in the back helping to check people in. Thank you, Kathy. We have our city manager, Alexander Hamilton. Our assistant city manager, Alma Martinez. Our Economic Development Director, Betty Donovanek. our Chief of Police, David Reynoso. And we have some other distinguished guests that we will introduce as this presentation goes on. But I would like to thank especially Ophelia Chong, who helped us put together this extraordinary panel today, and the outreach efforts that we've made to reach out to, frankly, a part of our community that doesn't get reached out to directly enough. And so I'm honored for the work that we did together. Thank you, Ophelia Chong, for your leadership today. So my portion of the presentation today will be about the history of cannabis. But before we get there, I'd like to call upon our Chief of Police, who will talk a little bit about the code of conduct for today.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning. My name is David Reynoso, I'm the Chief of Police, and I'm going to go over the code of conduct for today's meeting. It's a public meeting. It's to educate the public on this industry, and we want everyone to enjoy this meeting. It's your right to attend this public and community workshop. Disturbance of the community workshop may be a violation of California state law. If you plan to demonstrate, please do so in a respectful manner, stay off the streets, and do not block others' path of travel in an open public space. Respect persons with differing opinions, and please do not disturb the community workshop so that others can attend in peace. Walk away from confrontation. Respect public property. Damaging public property can be a violation of the law. Respect police lines and lawful orders that may be given by the police to maintain public safety. Like I said, this is a public meeting. We want people to be here and to enjoy the meeting, and I ask for all of you to please respect each other and maintain decorum throughout the entire meeting. We have police officers here in case you might have questions away from the presenters, and we are here available for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so we're going to start with historical and legal background in the United States. And we're going to go as far back as 1619. It's a distance, I know. Hemp, also known as cannabis, is used for the production of rope, sails, and clothing by decree of King James I in 1619. The Virginia Assembly, which was the first legislative body in the United States, passed legislation requiring every farmer to grow hemp. In 1873, the introduction of cannabis for the first time as medicine in the U.S. William O'Shaughnessy introduces the medical benefits of cannabis to Western medicine, and medicinal preparations of cannabis became available in American pharmacies by the 1850s. From the 1850s to the 1890s, pharmaceutical regulation, poison. Several states create penalties for mislabeled drugs and include cannabis in poison laws that require prescriptions for sale. So as this country was evolving and developing, the state of the law in this area was evolving as well. From the 1850s to the 1890s was the rise of recreational use. We think that recreational use just started happening in the 1970s. I certainly thought that before I started learning more about cannabis. Cannabis parlors emerge and proliferate on the East Coast between the 1850s and the 1890s. Then in 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act was adopted. United States Congress adopted legislation requiring that certain drugs, including cannabis, be properly labeled for over-the-counter dispensing. From the 1910s to the 1920s, there was an increase in immigration. During and after the Mexican Revolution of 1910, the U.S. saw an influx of Mexican immigration. This introduced the use of marijuana cigarettes to the U.S., which are a cheaper alternative to alcohol, the price of which had spiked during Prohibition. For those of you that grew up here in this country, you remember some of these terms like Prohibition and all the issues that came with that when we prohibited alcohol from being sold in the U.S. 1929, the Great Depression hits, xenophobia. Increasing, and by the way, some of these things are going to sound very familiar because history tends to repeat itself, interestingly enough. Increasing unemployment fueled growing resentment and fear of Mexican immigrants accused of stealing jobs and spreading marijuana throughout the country. Alcohol and tobacco are viewed as indigenous to American life, and cannabis as a dangerous narcotic of minorities and the underworld. In 1930, the Federal Bureau of Narcotics is established, and it's headed by Harry J. Anslinger. It's established as part of a broad push to outlaw all recreational drugs. In 1932, we had the Uniform State Narcotics Act. It established by the National Conference of Commissioners on Uniform State Laws. This act sought to make the law uniform in various states concerning narcotic regulation. By the middle of the 1930s, all member states had some regulation of cannabis. And by the way, this presentation was done previously before the adoption of our ordinance here in the city of El Monte in 2017. 1930s, Yellow Journalism Campaign, supported by William Randolph Hearst, media empire. Anslinger popularizes the term marijuana and asserts that the use leads to murder, rape, and insanity. The media frenzy culminates with the film Reefer Madness. In 1935, there was a growing fear. In California, the leader of the American Coalition of Patriotic Societies wrote, "Marijuana, perhaps the most insidious of our narcotics, is a direct byproduct of unrestricted Mexican immigration. Mexican peddlers have been caught distributing sample marijuana cigarettes to school children." In Texas, Texas police captain states, "Under marijuana, Mexicans become very violent. Under the influence of this weed, they have enormous strength, and it will take several men to handle one man, while under ordinary circumstances, one man could handle him with ease." These were quotes that were taken from real people. 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 was adopted. Congress passes the act, which federally criminalizes cannabis, restricting its possession or transfer to individuals who paid an excise tax for certain authorized medical and industrial uses. Even as far back as 1937, they were still recognizing it for some medical and industrial uses. In 1944, LaGuardia Commission report, a commission started by New York Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia, an opponent of the 1937 Act, issues a research report declaring that cannabis does not induce violence, insanity, or sex crimes, or lead to addiction or other drug use. I'm going to digress a little bit, but I can tell you this. I never thought that I would have the same position as Mayor Fiorella LaGuardia of New York. 1940s, World War II, Hemp for Victory campaign. During a decline of hemp imports during World War II for ropes and parachutes, the Department of Agriculture launches a program encouraging farmers to grow hemp, who are given draft deferments for such cultivation. So basically, you don't have to go to war if you grow hemp. 1952 to 1956, stricter federal sentencing laws. Congress passes the Boggs Act of 1952 and the Narcotics Control Act of 1956, making a first-time cannabis possession an offense with a minimum of 2 to 10 years imprisonment with a fine of up to $20,000. In the 1960s, expansion of cannabis use. Cannabis use is popularized among young white youth, especially college students, and is associated with the anti-war counterculture movement. In 1970, Controlled Substances Act of 1970, Congress passes the Controlled Substances Act, which eliminates mandatory minimum sentencing and made first-time possession of cannabis a misdemeanor, but also classifies cannabis as a Schedule I controlled substance that purportedly lacks any medical use and has high potential for abuse. In 1972, the Schaefer Commission, this bipartisan Nixon-appointed commission, issues a report, Marijuana, a Signal of Misunderstanding, that recommends the decriminalization of cannabis for simple possession. The Nixon administration does not implement the report's recommendations, but 11 states decriminalized cannabis in some form between 1973 and 1978 based on that report. 1973, Drug Enforcement Administration. The DEA is established by President Nixon to create a single federal agency to enforce federal drug laws. 1977, Carter Administration. In a speech to Congress, President Carter proposes the elimination of federal criminal penalties for the possession of up to 1 ounce of cannabis. In October 1977, the Senate Judiciary Committee voted to decriminalize possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana for personal use. In the 1980s, I grew up in the 1980s. Under Reagan, the drug war intensifies. The Comprehensive Crime Control Act creates mandatory sentencing guidelines. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act reinstates mandatory prison sentences for cannabis distribution, and a later amendment creates the 3 strikes law, imposing 25 years for repeat offenses. In 1996, Proposition 215, the Compassionate Use Act, is adopted. California voters adopt an initiative to enable use of medical cannabis for chronically ill persons with a physician's recommendation. In 2004, Medical Marijuana Program Act. The California legislature adopts a measure creating a voluntary medical marijuana identification card program and authorizes cities to adopt local ordinances that regulate the location, operation, or establishment of a medical marijuana cooperative or collective. And to give you some perspective, despite the fact that the state of California at that point allowed for local governments to establish, for example, medical marijuana dispensaries, the city of El Monte opted not to at that time and continued with a ban. In 2015, the Medical Marijuana Regulation and Safety Act, Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act were adopted. The California legislature adopts laws creating a comprehensive dual state licensing system for the cultivation, manufacture, retail, sale, transport, distribution, delivery, and testing of medical marijuana. So it took from the adoption of the voters in 1996 to 2015 before the legislature adopted this particular set of laws. And then in 2016, many of you will remember Proposition 64, the Adult Use of Marijuana Act. California voters approved a measure to allow recreational cannabis use for adults over 21 and personal cultivation of up to 6 plants. A regulatory and licensing body is established for recreational cannabis related to cultivation, manufacturing, testing, and distribution. And I will say, and since I'm sharing the history here, I will share my personal history as well. Oh, thank you very much for that reminder. My personal history as well. I actually took a position against the legalization of marijuana in California, Prop 64. If you go online, you'll see that was the case. My background, for those of you that don't know, is I'm a prosecutor for the city of Los Angeles, in addition to being the mayor of the city of El Monte. And so, because we prosecute drug crimes, first of all, I didn't understand enough about marijuana, nor did I care to understand enough about marijuana. I just knew it was against the law, and that was the position that I had taken. Then Proposition 64 passes. In El Monte, it passed 54.49%. I looked it up after the election, and I was surprised to see that amount of support. In 2017, Senate Bill 94 was passed. It's the California legislature that adopts a streamlined regulatory and licensing structure for both medicinal and adult use commercial cannabis activities. And in 2018, the FDA approves CBD solution. U.S. Food and Drug Administration approves Epidiolex, sorry if I can't pronounce that correctly, Epidiolex, a CBD oral solution for the treatment of seizures associated with two rare and severe forms of epilepsy. The FDA had previously approved drugs using synthetic components of cannabis, but Epidiolex is the first approved drug derived from actual cannabis plants. So now the FDA has approved one drug for use for two very severe forms of epilepsy. 2018, so just last year, hemp, a type of cannabis, is removed from Schedule I of the Controlled Substances Act. Commercial hemp cultivation is authorized, which paves the way for large-scale CBD extraction and processing. So when you see in stores CBD or creams associated with CBD, that can be taken from hemp. Hemp is allowed by the federal government to grow in the U.S. and it's no longer on Schedule I. 2019 state cannabis regulations. State regulations regarding commercial cannabis licensing become effective as of January 16, 2019. Regulation 54160 authorizes adult use of medicinal commercial cannabis deliveries to any jurisdiction in the state of California, preempting any local ban on such deliveries. So here in the city of El Monte, and you're going to hear more about this from our economic development director, we adopted certain regulations. And one of them was to ban deliveries in our community. Now, because of this regulation, 5416D, if there's a licensed facility outside of our city that has the authority to deliver, they can deliver not just in the city of El Monte, but they can deliver in Temple City, they can deliver in Arcadia, they can deliver in Rowland Heights, they can deliver in Monterey Park, they can deliver in Monrovia, they can deliver anywhere in the state of California, as long as they're licensed to do so. And also, because a lot of times people say, well, I don't believe that cannabis has any medicinal values whatsoever. Under state law, medicinal cannabis is available for use for serious medical conditions, which include, but are not limited to, the following: AIDS, anorexia, arthritis, cachexia, cancer, chronic pain, glaucoma, migraine, persistent muscle spasms, including multiple sclerosis spasms, seizures, severe nausea. This is in the code of Health and Safety Code section 11362.7 as adopted by the California legislature. Now to get a better sense of how we got to this place today. We had one workshop in 2017. Many things have happened since the end of 2017 to now. I'm going to introduce Betty Donovanik, who's going to share El Monte's process and where we are in El Monte. But before I turn it over to her, I just want to thank all of you for being here and how grateful I am that you're willing to sit through this presentation and learn a little bit more about cannabis and marijuana in the state of California and the city of El Monte. We're going to have a time for some questions
Is
later.
that online? Is the
Later on.
presentation online?
We're now broadcasting on Facebook. So you'll be able to download it on Facebook, and we're also going to try to broadcast it on our cable channel as well.